Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Ophelia here, and thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you're new here, welcome to my little corner of the internet or of YouTube where I just kind of create and play around in my journal, and I appreciate you guys coming along for this adventure of mine. If you've been here for a while, thank you guys so much for always showing up for such positive comments and honestly just such love here. Today I'm just playing around in my journal. I always usually start with just gluing random bits of paper down, and I've used some matte medium. Usually I just buy the Liquitex brand, put it in a ketchup bottle because it's easier to kind of squeeze out. And I've used a little bit of gesso. I just like to put down a thin layer just so I can still see what's going on underneath with the print, but then I like to kind of knock it back. Once I've dried it all up, I pull out my Lukas watercolor palette, and in this palette I've kind of outfitted it, fitted if that's a word, but I've just put in some of my favorite watercolor brands like Lukas. I've got some Daniel Smith, I've got some Turner in there, just a bunch of different brands or colors that I enjoy. I do know that today I want to make this page mainly blues and greens since I've been on the reds and oranges lately. So I'm just pulling out some different colors. That was my daughter, who of course stopped by to say hello. But I'm just pulling out some different colors of blues and greens that I just want to add. And all I'm doing is kind of splashing color around. I'm going to lift the journal here, spritz it with some water, and just to get myself a little bit of drips. This is just kind of a beginning warm-up phase, as most of this will be kind of covered up in the end. Once I dry it up, I'm going to pull out my acrylic paints, and as usual, I use my Lukas acrylic paints. I've pulled some blues, some greens. That color is Fern. I'll leave all of the products that I'm using in the description box, but I've got some Sennelier. Number 615 is my favorite orange. I'm also trying out some Nova color as well as some Amsterdam, but like I said, I'll leave those all linked in the comments. And I'm just starting out with mixing a little bit of that gray just to kind of soften things up and I guess push everything to the back, as all I'm doing right now is just building the background. What I know that I want is to create more of like a gratitude type page. So I'm just pulling out random colors. All of those colors that I showed in the beginning may not necessarily make their way onto the page, but I just kind of like a variety when I get ready to start. And if I don't use them in this page, I'll kind of flip to a random page and use up the excess. Once that's all dried up, I'm going to get myself some washi tape. Now, I do like using the printed paper that I put down in the beginning for some visual texture with the crinkles and then the words that you can still see. But then I also like to add other elements for interest, and you know, my stash of washi tape is just a bit fierce, so I wanted to use some of that up. I've gotten myself a smaller brush and I'm just kind of going around with some of that orange paint. And then I found these little sticky notes from my stash, so I figured why not glue a couple of those down just to give the page a bit more interest. So I'm just honestly trying my best to use up what I have in my stash. It's been a bit, and I'm sorry that's out of frame as I continue to work, but I'm gonna get myself some colored pencils and just kind of scribble around. But then I realized it's not as dark as I want, so I of course go off and get my Jerry's Jumbo Jet black pencil, and that's probably, or this pencil is one of my favorites for just adding a very dark mark. I just love how it looks to kind of scribble around with that Jerry's Jumbo Jet black pencil. And then I use the other colored pencils just to kind of make some marks and scribbles in the background. I pulled out my Matisse. It is a unbleached titanium. I'll also leave that one. That's probably one of my most favorite neutrals. I use that a lot. And what I like to do when I'm I guess, gluing things down, like those little sticky notes that I glued down earlier, is instead of just kind of gluing them down and sticking them down on the page, I like to add another color around them to make them look like they're more meshed into the page. So I've pulled out some Paynes gray because I realized that I needed something a little bit darker on the page instead of just everything being very muted. So I've pulled out some Paynes gray and have kind of mixed in a little bit of that unbleached titanium and Paynes gray to just kind of give the page a bit more of a punch, maybe. Once I've glued that down or dried everything up, I've pulled out some of my collage sheets from Courtney Diaz, which I was a Patreon of hers, and I just love her collage sheets. So I've pulled some of those as well as some collage sheets from Robin Marie Smith, and I'm just going to kind of glue those down, or what's the word I'm looking for? There goes my doorbell. But I guess I just want to audition them around on my page for a bit. But I'm just going to cut those out. I find that I just love, I don't know why, I just love Robin Marie's collage sheets as well as Courtney. She's Little Raven Ink. I just love their collage sheets and find that regardless of how many collage sheets that I own, those are the ones that I always end up going back to. So I'm thinking the top bigger square is one that I will use to maybe do my title. And then I've got the other ones where I just want to add like splashes of color on my page without necessarily having to pull paint back out. So I'm just kind of auditioning those around, deciding what will go where, but I do think I like that large square as more of like a block for a title. And so I'm just going to glue those down. Again, I will come back in with some acrylic paint to, instead of where they look as though they're just sitting on top of the page, I want to make sure that they're more meshed in or married into the page, if that even makes any kind of sense. And so once I get them glued down, I'm just going to cut off the excess, which unfortunately you guys can't see because it's off frame or out of frame down at the bottom of the page. But I'm just going to cut that extra piece off so that it's not hanging over. And this is a page where at some point I want to do a video where I am like showing you how I use my watercolor, which is different, I guess, than how people normally use watercolor. So look forward to another video coming out with that. I guess it's not so different, but maybe I just never learned to properly use watercolor like they should be. Now that I've gotten those elements glued down, I'm just using some of the gray and white and just to kind of go around those elements so that they're more married into the page. And unfortunately, I apologize that the bottom is still off or out of your view. So I'm just kind of going around the elements, adding some paint here and there. I've spritzed my rag with some water just so that I can wipe out some of the paint that I put on that bottom square. And just kind of, I wanted to brighten it up a little bit more, so instead of the gray, I used that unbleached titanium. I think that's the name of it, but I will link it below. And again, using my rag to kind of wipe away the paint that made its way onto the collage sheet. Once I've kind of gotten everything dry, I go back in and add more of that orange that I took out when I started putting more paint down, just to kind of add a little bit more of a punch of color. I use the back side of my paintbrush with some of that Paynes gray to just add some dots and such like that around the elements that I've glued to the page. And then I'm going to pull out my paint markers, and I just find that it's a little bit easier to add my title that way, with a paint marker instead of pulling out my inks that I usually do. These are the Posca paint pens, as well as I've got an Amsterdam in that light rose color, which is the same color of that Amsterdam paint. Um, and then still just using my Jerry's Jumbo Jet black pencil just to kind of grunge things up. It's honestly one of my favorite mark making tools that there are around. Yes, I do love using Stabilos, but for just a really, really, really dark mark, I just love that Jerry's Jumbo Jet black pencil. I'm priming because the pink Amsterdam marker is new, and so I've had to kind of prime it quite a bit to get it to do what it is that, or I guess to get the paint flowing. Um, and then my page is gratitude. And then on the bottom there, gosh, why is that still out of frame? But on the bottom, it says a list. And then I realized that I really did not like the way that that looked. So as I'm still priming that pen to get the ink to flow, I go back to my collage to get another circle to cover up where I put that down in the bottom corner, just because I just did not really like it there. And the beautiful part in a journal is you make a mistake, you just cover it up either with another piece of paper, or in lots of cases, I will cover it up with gesso and start all over again. In this scenario, I just literally added another circle from that same page of circles that I had, glued it right over the top, did exactly like I would normally do, and get some paint to kind of go around the edges, or use a pencil to kind of grunge around it, and it's literally like the mistake was never there, if that makes sense. So that's why I guess I find a journal so freeing, is because you just cover it up, or a canvas. You just kind of cover up the things that you don't like. And so I'm just going to cut off the extra piece of that. And that middle space, I'm going, well, of course, now I'm still trying to get that poor paint pen to prime, and I should have paid more attention. But I'm just going to use the pink of that pen once I get it primed, or I usually like to pump it and then let the ink kind of flow on its own and then come back to it. But I'm just going to use that like I'm doing with this black pencil, and just kind of add more scribbles and such around the page. But because it's pink, it kind of hides there in the background. Now, yes, I will use it in some of the darker spots, but I'm kind of mimicking the X marks in the Robin Marie collage sheet there, just to kind of add more of that around the page. So that's why I'm using the pink. The middle space I'm going to use to journal, and I figure I'd do that off camera, but this is the page really, except for just kind of going around adding bits and pieces here and there. This is basically the page as it's finished for now, and I will just journal in it later, but I really just wanted to create a gratitude page, just because even with everything that is going on, I still feel as though I have so very much to be grateful for, and it's just a nice reminder. So I honestly hope that you guys will pull out your materials and create your own gratitude list. Here's the page up close. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.